So welcome back again for the fourth module on the IRFM's program on tenders for railway officers. Now this module is focusing on the process of tender invitation. It's a short, crisp module and would like to have your attention for this. Now tender invitation is essentially a process through which a public authority invites tender. Now that requires a detailed planning, and the planning of tender invitation begins with something called the tender notice. And I'm sure every day you find several such tender notices placed on newspapers. What is a tender notice? It's a notice which is put or an advertisement which is put for the public and for everyone to know that railway is interested in inviting bids from tenderers who can supply or who can perform the work that railway is looking for, right? So the tender notice usually consists of name of the work, so the kind of work that has to be done. So for example, if we say that deep screening of track has to be done, formation has to be done, then the tender notice will say that deep screening of railway track from kilometer X to kilometer Y, right? So now the name of the work with its location, the approximate cost of work. So deep screening of this work from kilometer X to Y, and this is going to cost, let's say, 30 lakh rupees in railway's own estimate. The type of tender, whether this is open tender or limited tender. Sometimes limited tenders are always advertised just to bring it to the notice of people who are in the approved list. Open tender is something where it has necessarily to be advertised, put up on notice board of railway office, put up on notice board of various government offices. So we have to say that this is open tender or limited tender. In limited tenders, people who do not qualify or people who are ineligible, they are not allowed to participate. The tender document is also not sold to them. Then the eligibility criteria, at least in brief. The cost of tender form. So if someone wants to purchase the tender form, then what's the price of the that he needs to pay to purchase the tender form? The address of office from where the tender can be purchased. So if let's say senior divisional electrical engineer, he has advertised the tender, then he has to put the office name as senior DE. And if he's senior DE of Mumbai Central, then senior DE BCT. So the name and address of the office from which the tender has to be purchased. The amount of earnest money which has to be deposited, and I'm going to talk about what earnest money means, and we're right, the estimated completion period of work. So if we want this deep screening to be done in 1 month, then we have to say it has to be done in 1 month. If we want this to be done in 9 months, then we have to say the estimated time of completion is 9 months. Now this is an indication to the person who knows whether he has capacity or capability to do this work in 1 month or 9 months, and accordingly he would be interested in participating in the tender. Then mandatorily we need to have these details, date and time of submission of tender and opening of tender. So that this tender of deep screening is due for submission on 11th August at 3:30 p.m. So that has to be submitted, and the tender will be opened at 4 p.m. on 11th August. The website particular and notice board location where complete details of tender can be seen. Now, as I had discussed before, there is certain minimum period of advertisement. The standard period of advertisement is 1 month between the publication of NIT and the last date of bid submission. Now, this 30 days is a time which a bidder needs to understand your work. He needs to do his research of the work. He needs to spend time to do his detailed costing, prepare the bid, and submit the bid in the desired form by the railway administration. In rare cases, this duration is reduced from 30 days to sometimes 21 days or even 15 days or even 10 days. So the standard bidding period is 1 month. Now, let's look at a sample tender notice which has been taken from one of the newspapers. So this is Indian Railways electrification. It has tender notice number because this notice number can be a reference point for everyone to flag the tender. Then it says signaling work. It says that for and behalf of President of India. So all tenders are invited for and behalf of President of India. And this is very important, right? So we as government servant, we undertake all powers which have been delegated to us by uh, by the executive, which is the President of India. So all works and any sanction of from parliamentary exchequer can only be undertaken on behalf of President of India, right? So for and behalf of President of India, Deputy Chief Engineer Signaling and Telecom of Railway Electrification Secunderabad invites sealed tender open. So look, the word open is here for the following works, and following work is here, which is up to 1500 hours of the due date. So the due time and the due date is important. So all the things which are encircled in red are important. So this is a tender number which matches with a tender number which is here. So both of them, they have to match. The description of work. So this tender is for signaling work in connection with 25 kV electrification of some section. The estimated cost of work is 85,33,399 rupees. And the completion period for this work that railways or the deputy CST is soliciting is for 4 months. And for this work, the earnest money requirement is 1,70,670. The cost of tender form, if it has to be purchased in person, is 5,620 rupees, and if it has to be sent by post, then there is a additional 500 rupee charge for this. Now, important deadlines are all put here. This is a nicely done tender document. The last date of issue of tender document in person is such and such date, which is 11th May 2009. Last date by issue of tender document through post is 1st May, which is because there's going more time will be taken for the tender to reach this person. And this is last date for sale of tender form is usually 1 day before the closing of tender. So if the tender is due on 12th May, then the last day is 11th May. But this tender is published at least a month before the closing date. So this tender has been published on 6th April, and the due date is is 12th May, which is 36 days from the date of publication. So adequate notice has been given. Then it says that, for further tender details, people can log on to a few websites, which is tenders.gov.in or co.railnet.gov.in. So this is old tender. So these addresses are given, but in modern case, in the newer cases, it would be IRAS. So this is a sample tender notice now, which really matches with all the things that we discussed in the tender notice boilerplate. So it's a standard document. Whenever you're preparing a tender notice, ensure that we fill all this, and then the tender notice is sent out. Now, basis this, there's an assignment that we have given. We want you to undertake, all of you, and this is individual assignment for all of you, which is collect one recent tender notice for each of the following departments of railway, which is civil engineering, signaling, electrical, commercial, and stores. And then the task is to identify similarities and differences between each of the tender notice. So it's a fairly simple assignment, but we're very sure that the learnings of this assignment is going to be fantastic. It is going to throw more insights. It's going to bring out more understanding about how tender notices are prepared, and it would be great fun for you to find the discrepancies or differences between various tender notices. And that's where the learning begins. So we hope that you are able to submit this assignment in the next 3 days, and we eagerly await that assignment. This can be sent by email to the email ID shivesh@entrepreneurship.edu.in, and I'm going to flag this again at the end of this session. Now, the second stage is tender document. Now, tender document has comprise of the notice inviting tender, the same as, so this was the notice inviting tender, so it comprised of notice inviting tender. Then instructions to tender. So in a tender document, then there is a chapter which has instructions to tender and conditions of tender. Right, the conditions of tender, we are going to talk about it. Then there's a chapter on eligibility criteria. List of documents which have to be furnished by bidder. So list of documents could be in terms of his turnover, in terms of his financial. List of documents could also be in terms of quality certificates, in terms of TQM, in terms of it's a supply of ballast, then it's a test certificate for the robustness, strength, water absorption capacity of ballast from approved government laboratories. So those documents have to be furnished. It has tender schedule and other mandatory forms. When we say mandatory forms, these are the pro formas in which the bidder has to enter his bid. So the price bid and commercial bid. The agreement form. So the sample agreement form, which has to be executed upon the acceptance of tender, it has to be given ahead, because all the conditions mentioned in the agreement becomes part of the contract. Then tender document also contains details of earnest money deposit, security deposit, performance guarantee, and we will discuss these, what does this mean. But these money which the bidder has to submit, it has to be provided for, and the form in which these deposits have to come, it has to be written. Then it will have waivers. So waivers, for example, if there is a startup or if there's a MSME, then any waivers in terms of eligibility or in terms of price, anything, any benefits that the government as a parts of, which is a part of government standard policy, that has to be stated in the tender document. And then the agreement form, which is mentioned here, agreement form will have general conditions of contract, and it's worth studying every item of general conditions of contract. Then if there are any special conditions of contract which is approved by competent authorities, when special conditions of contract could be special quality conditions, special test conditions, supply conditions that we want to communicate to the bidder, and the order of precedence in case if there's conflict between the reading of two paragraphs, then which paragraph will get precedence. So this is the standard tender document, and each item mentioned in this tender document is essential. If we fail to provide any of these items, then the tender document becomes weak, and it becomes prone to risks and litigations. Now, what is EMD, performance guarantee, and security deposit? So let's look at each of these three terms one by one. So earnest money is nothing. Earnest money deposit is also called EMD. It's a risk cover which is provided in the contract, which only brings in parties which are really interested to participate in the bid. Now, what happens really? So if you don't have these risk covers, tomorrow when we agree on a tenderer, on the bidder to award work, and after award of work, if he withdraws, then a large amount of time, money, resource is lost in finalization of tender. So government bodies, railway administration, to preclude such risks, it provides for earnest money deposit, which is a small fraction of the approximate cost of work. Typically, for higher value works, it can be as low as 0.5%. And for lower value work, it is about 2%. So it ranges from 2% to 0.5%. And that has to be submitted by contractor to show his genuineness and sincerity for bidding. Now, this amount is refunded to all unsuccessful bidders upon the completion of the tender finalization. So all unsuccessful bidders, their earnest money is refunded. But for the successful tenderer, this money is adjusted with the security deposit, and I'm going to talk about it. Now, performance guarantee, it's also called PG, and sometimes it is also called PBG, performance bank guarantee, because it's the format in which this guarantee is taken. Performance guarantee is taken for the purpose of successful performance of contract. So if I award a contract of 1 crore to a bidder, to a tenderer, and he is successful. Now, upon the successful award of contract, now we want an undertaking from that contractor, a performance guarantee that he will work for the entire contractual period, and for that he submits a guarantee, and usually this guarantee ranges from anywhere from 5% to 10% of the contract value. Now, this performance guarantee can be in the form of demand draft, it could be in the form of bank guarantee, and that's why it's called performance bank guarantee, or letter of credit. In those forms, it can be submitted to the railway administration, and this should be submitted within 60 days of the issue of letter of award. Right? Upon the successful completion of the contract, this guarantee is document is returned back to the contractor. The final term is security deposit, and it has shades of performance bank guarantee. It's an amount which is equal to 5% of the contract value, which is paid by the contractor in token of due fulfillment of contract. So it really matches very much with the performance bank guarantee, but performance bank guarantee, you know. The format of performance guarantee could be either in the form of monies, or in the form of demand draft, or in the form of bank guarantee issued by the bank. Whereas security deposit, 5% of the contract value, it is first adjusted from the earnest money of the successful bidder immediately on the award of LOA, and then the balance amount is deducted from his running bills till the time it achieves 5% of the total contract value. So these three are essential in contract. Check for this whether your contract provides for EMD, PG, and security deposit, and also check whether the form of these are in the right format. Then in tender document, there is something called minimum eligibility criteria. So serious bidding happens only when there are serious bidders. So and very often, to preclude or to eliminate frivolous bidders, railway provides for minimum eligibility criteria. Now, the standard minimum eligibility criteria includes a turnover criteria and a criteria of having executed similar work. So, item number A and item number B here. Now in terms of the way railway works, the turnover criteria is typically 150% of the advertised cost of work. So the bidder who are participating in the tender, their turnover should be the average turnover in the last 3 years, or call it the qualifying period, right? And it's well defined. So in the qualifying period, the average turnover of the bidder should be 150% of the advertised cost of the work. So if the advertised cost of the work is 1 crore, then the average turnover in the 3-year period should be 1.5 crore. Effectively, it means that in the 3-year period, the total turnover of the party should be 4.5 crores, because in 1 year, it's the average value, the average turnover should be 1.5 crores. So total in 3 years, because 1.5 is the average, so overall in 3 years, it will be 4.5 crores, right? So there could be variations in qualifying period. In some contracts, people write 5-year qualifying period, sometimes 7-year qualifying periods are written. So these are decided on the basis of importance of work and the quality of contractors that we want to have. If we have a 7-year qualifying period, which means that we are only interested in contractors who have history of working for minimum 7 years. Versus if we have 3-year qualifying period, then we are interested in parties who have only 3-year work experience. So it is reasonable to expect that people who have been in contracting business or in supply business who have 7-year experience, they will have more uh, uh, skin in the game, and they are more serious bidders, and they'll be more interested in working with railway. Now, the second criteria is of having executed a single work which is 35% of the advertised value of the work. Now, what does this mean? Let's say if I have an advertised value of work which is 1 crore. Now, 35% of 1 crore is 35 lakhs. So if we are advertising a work of 1 crore, then we want a contractor who should have executed at least one work which is of the value of 35 lakh rupees, right? So if I give a work of 1 crore, this person should have experience of executed work nearly about 1/3 of the cost of work, which means that if a person has executed in the qualifying period a cost of work which is 35 lakhs, then it is reasonable to expect that he can then also step up and take larger quantum of work. Now, in various cases, this 35%, if you are the tender in which inviting authority, then you can take your reasonable calls, make reasonable judgments, whether you want to keep it 35% or 50%. But in most railway tenders, we do not see this going below 30%. So these are to our minimum eligibility criteria, and the parties who are bidding, they have to satisfy both the criteria. It is not or, it is and. So a party has to satisfy the turnover criteria as well as single work criteria, both. Now, in tender, we also have a pre-bid meeting. Now, pre-bid meeting is a serious matter. Now, pre-bid meetings are held only to clarify the scope and the technicalities of work to the bidders. It's a formal meeting in which all parties come and attend together, and the tender inviting authority, he issues clarification to the questions. Point to note is that in a pre-bid meeting, every question asked by the bidder is minuted, and the response of authority is also minuted, and a formal updation of minutes of pre-bid meeting is uploaded on the website and also circulated to the tenderers. This is attended by the executive who has invited for the tender, and the finance officer in railway administration. Now, all clarifications given in the pre-bid meeting becomes a part of the tender document, which means that uh, uh, it becomes the responsibility of railway administration. Then comes the tender opening stage. Now, there are two types of tenders that we are talking. The standard, let's say the old form of tenders, which is paper-based, and the new form of tenders, which are e-tenders. Now, a lot of processes are simpler in e-tenders. A lot of process are, fairly rigorous in the paper-based tender. Now, a paper-based tender, which is on the left side of this slide. This is opened at specified time and date and place. Even e-tender is opened at the specified time, right? Place is not mentioned because it is done on the internet. This is opened by nominated officers. Even the e-tenders are opened by nominated officers. This is opened in the presence of bidders. Here also it is opened in the presence of bidders, except that bidders can attend the tender opening online. And when it is online, then every bidder gets to see the overall price bid of every other bidder. Here, in the old form, the price bid of every bidder is announced and declared to everyone. Now, few of the important things we want you to make note of. While tender opening, there's a tender opening committee. It is standard to have a tender opening committee, and only this committee can open the tender, which comprise of minimum 2 officers. Sometimes it could be 3. Now, these 2 officers are necessarily again from executive and finance. Now, at the stage of tender opening, the packet in which the sealed packet in which the tender has come It has to be cross-signed on the packet for that the seal has not been broken, that it is in sealed cover in the right condition. Then the front page of tender document is signed. Then all the tender pages are signed. So it's a rigorous process in which a lot of hard work has to be done by everyone. Then at tender opening, the tender opening committee also checks for the earnest money which comes in the form of a bank draft, FD, fixed deposit receipt. This has to be kept in safe custody. You have to, if you are part of tender committee, then you have to sign on all overwritings, corrections, and these are important to ensure that at a later date there is no ambiguity. Uh, all rates are encircled and signed. All overwritings are signed in red ink. Right? If there is a difference between rates quoted in number and rates quoted in word, then again these are flagged and signed. Then if we have called for some samples, as I told you about Belas samples, and those we have to record whether those samples have been given. Sometimes samples will come in big boxes, bags, etc., and these have to be kept in secure custody. And then, as a practice, there is a tender opening register in which all the people who attend the tender opening, in the case of open tender, their names, designations, addresses, mobile numbers, etc., are recorded, and also the signatures are taken of all the people who have attended. Right? E-tendering, as I mentioned, is a simpler process. Not much of this happens. Everything is E, so there's no question of overwriting, corrections, etc. If there is any special condition quoted by the tenderer, then it stands out. It's electronically controlled document. EMD is again in the electronic form, so everything is, it comes directly into the account of railway administration. So checks and balances are less, but the rates have to be announced, and rates of other parties have also to be shared. Now, in terms of this unit, if you have any question, feel free to ask me. And just to remind you, the submission of this assignment, which is study of tender notices, it has to be made at this email ID, which is shivesh@entrepreneurship.edu.in. Thank you very much.